Well, here we are again with another episode of Chicago Hill. I'm LaShawn Ford, coming straight from the west side of Chicago, the Austin community. Got my friends here. They got a different zip code, and they think they better because of their zip code. Meleika, where you at?
I'm on the North Shore in Evanston.
Listen at her. I'm on the North Shore in Evanston.
She sounds like it. And I'm in Oak Park to the west of Representative Ford. And I would argue that, no, we don't think this, at least my zip code isn't any better. You and I were just talking about that the other day.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you know it. And you know what? I'm in Chicago, and Chicago is healing. And it's because of the work that people are doing all over the city, understanding the challenges. And previously in other episodes, we talked about the police. And we realized that one way to help heal the community is to make sure that we have a better relationship with law enforcement and the community, recognizing that we're not taking up and defending the police. We're trying to make sure that we just have a better police force so that everybody could be safe, businesses could operate. And I just want you to know, Mark and Meleika, it's our goal in Chicago to take as much of the business from your communities and bring it into Chicago as possible. And the best way to do that is to make sure that we have safe communities. So the number one issue that I'm hearing in the city of Chicago, across the state and in the country, is violence and the relationship between police. We got a clip from WTTW Chicago about the Chicago police. Let's take a listen.
For many Chicagoans, George Floyd's killing by a police officer, captured on camera, was a sadly familiar sight.
A Cook County judge ruled today that the city must release the video purported to show a police officer shooting a 17-year-old African-American named Laquan McDonald.
As George Floyd's death on camera echoed that of Laquan McDonald's, so McDonald's death echoed that of another 17-year-old a century earlier.
The 1919 Race Riots were a mass wave of violence sparked by the death of a teenage boy named Eugene Williams.
Williams was stoned after swimming too close to a whites-only beach. He drowned. In the week of riots that followed, 38 people died. Chicago police were denounced for failing to protect African Americans and to arrest white rioters. The city's treatment of its Black and Latinx residents was a persistent stain in the decades that followed, even if city leaders maintained plausible deniability.
In the South, in Mississippi, racism was obvious. It was the water fountain. In Chicago, racism was sometimes hard to see here.
In 1965, Dr. Martin Luther King moved to Chicago to highlight housing conditions for Black residents. He took a rock to the head during a march. In 1968, Black Panthers Mark Clark and Fred Hampton took bullets. 99 of them fired into an apartment by law enforcement.
They were really fighting for the poor people and speaking out against the ugly ills of this society.
One of Chicago's ugliest ills? The reign of terror of former police commander John Burge, accused of torturing suspects for decades.
He's going to put the plastic bag over my head and told me not to bite through it. He said, "Nick, if you bite through this bag, you're going to beat me down." He did me like that about 6-7 times. About the last 4 times, I thought I was dead.
Burge was fired by the department in 1993, but wasn't convicted of a crime until 2010.
Even me, I'm proud to be American. Probably one of the very first times in history. I'm proud to be American. I feel a part of the system. I feel a part of the justice right now.
But many others in Chicago don't. Despite many rounds of reforms, community policing programs, and efforts to build bridges between cops and communities, the names of the men and women killed by Chicago police still ring through the city's streets.
Fallout today from Monday's acquittal of a Chicago police officer charged with manslaughter for the killing of Rakia Boyd.
The police shooting of a 37-year-old Southside man, Harith Augustus, is drawing a third night of protest this evening.
55-year-old grandmother Betty Jones and 19-year-old Quintonio LeGrier were both shot and killed by police.
And many Chicagoans are angry not just at officers, but also at a legal system that they think often doesn't hold cops accountable.
State's Attorney Anita Alvarez admitted that the impending release of the video forced her to charge the officer sooner than she would have, despite a year-long investigation.
The officer who killed Laquan McDonald, Jason Van Dyke, did eventually answer for the young life he took.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Jason Van Dyke, guilty of second-degree murder.
Everything we been through was perfect.
Second-degree murder, y'all.
While Van Dyke's conviction was a victory for activists, it was also a reminder of work left unfinished.
All elected, all civilian, Police Accountability Council. That means we get to say who polices our communities and how our communities are policed. Until we get that power, these injustices will continue to go on and creep back up.
And some Black Chicagoans continue to say that their only interactions with police are negative and that has a lasting impact on their communities.
So this is what I think, Meleika and Mark, we have to make sure that if we're going to talk about healing relationships between the police and the community, we have to make sure that we understand what healing is like and why it's necessary. So police see this video, police hear this this clip, and they have to say, this isn't right. We have to do something about it. I mean, that's what I saw, and that's what I hear. And I believe that if you're serious about reforming the Chicago police, you look at the past, and that way you can move forward and make improvements.
You know, as I was looking at that, you know what occurred to me? Just what we were, you know, when we start this show, we introduce ourselves and say where we're from. And I was thinking, you know, an awful lot of people from Ford's neighborhood come to my neighborhood for basic services like banking and groceries. A lot of the business in Oak Park's actually on the west side. And that's why you were talking about bringing it back to Chicago, because a lot of West Siders come to Oak Park. And that just shows me that, you know, you don't have to look at cops killing young Black men to know that there's a racist system alive and well. And so to me, that's just such a complicating factor. And what I wanted to really ask you guys was, is it possible to build trust, to reform the police, to have a new relationship with the communities of color, even as that is within the rubric of a still structurally racist system?
I think it's possible. I have hope. I'm a person with hope. I do think it's possible. It depends on the leadership. Rep Ford. Yeah,
you know, Meleika, you're absolutely right. It depends on the leadership. Because, you know, consequences, expectations are all a part of changing behavior and acknowledging the wrongs that have been done. You know, the fact that we know that Black people have had a bad relationship with the police for as long as there have been police is a problem. And I don't think we really as a society have even thought about really taking this on and calling it as it is, racism. And it's racism in a department, in departments that's really a matter of life and death. And Mark, we talked about the fact last week, you said that we asked people to do, you said better because it's your quote. So say it again about the pay. About the what? We asked people to do $1 million job for a penny.
Oh, well, that's right. And, you know, for example, who has a more serious job, a baseball player or a policeman,
Right.
a football player or an actor or an actress or a teacher. Okay. To me, there is no question. One is about ha 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 or woo. The other one is about life and death. Now, I'm not saying we can't have all of those, but to me, it just seems like a system that's completely out of balance. When we ask a teacher to do a job for pennies, that's $1 million job. And within that context of raising and shaping young people, the next generation, we also have somebody who makes a movie and makes $15 million or more. And so to me, it's like when the kids look at that, when the professionals themselves look at that, it's sort of just like that old adage, you get what you pay for. And if you're going to value a cop's, and by the way, I'm not saying, again, every cop deserves a raise, et cetera, but I think really, what is the context within which we set these salaries? What is the context within which we value these civil servants? Because everybody complains about, oh, teachers get paid too much, policemen get paid too much. But the reality is that's not true. That's not true. If a football player gets $5 million a year, you know what? I think a teacher should at least get $500,000. Let's make it some percentage of that.
Yeah. The problem is...
Can you tell I feel passionately about that?
Yeah, I do. And
Yes.
I think, Meleika, you would say what about the pay?
I agree with Mark 100%. I mean, when we have to pull over for the paramedics, driving by, since we started the show, I really started wondering, how much do they get paid? I don't think they get paid that much.
Meleika.
And they need to be on the, I mean, that is putting your life in danger to save other people. They should get paid.
And as Representative Ford saw this past session, because these guys were in Springfield telling us that the pay is so low and the training requirements are so significant that there's a shortage of EMS workers and EMTs. So the guy that's going to pick me up and keep me alive to the hospital gets close to minimum wage.
That's crazy.
And has to keep me alive and make no mistakes while working a 24-hour shift because there's not enough workers to go around. It just, classic. I'm glad you mentioned, EMS in particular.
Well, I tell you, the one thing that we have to do, I think that when you talk about people in recovery, they have to recognize that there's a problem. Leadership must bring the police to the table, and there must be a serious dialogue and an acknowledgement that there is a problem, that there is racism in the police departments, not just in Chicago, but across America. And the problem is, if you look like me, your life is in danger. If you look like Mark, you are better off when it comes to policing. And if you are a police officer and you don't agree with this, we got a problem. I mean, the history shows. And so all I'm saying is, let's recognize that there's a problem. Let's bring the police to the table. Let's stop fighting. There's no reason to fight, because what we've gotten from fighting over the years are more Black people getting killed, more taxpayer dollars going to lawsuits, and less money to education. I mean, I know you guys, we have lots of conversation ahead of us about this. And I think that there are some more clips that we wanted to talk about.
I definitely agree with that education piece. I think there needs to be more. I believe the training is in place. It's just they use the proper training, like you said, for Mark, but won't use it for us necessarily. But I do think that they should get like a 4-year degree. I believe we've talked about that before as well. Yeah, I think there should be some more education involved as well. And if you're going to pay them more, then the education needs to, to come up.
Merit pay, so to speak.
And more cleaning of looking into their background, their affiliations. Like we said, have you been affiliated with white supremacy or with any gangs in the past? I mean, like a serious deep dive into their affiliations all the way back to when they were kids. That needs to be examined before they can become a police officer, as well as some deep psychological testing before they can become a police officer.
Psychological testing. But I would think that if a person is in their right mind and they're thinking clearly, they're making the decisions to do certain things out of racism, I think that even a racist person could be held checked if there are consequences that are in place, because consequences really dictates behavior. And Meleika, even if we have highly trained people, you say, yeah, the training is in place because it works for Mark. Well, that's the problem. The training has to be diversified, that this person that comes from a neighborhood that's 99.9% Black and 99.9% white, and the only Black person that they see comes in to do some type of service for somebody white. They are not equipped to understand the cultures. And that's why it's important that we train a person well-roundedly. And so they are trained, but we need better training. We need to add training so that we have this diversity in them.
Can I ask one question? Because this is
hold on. The white man just asked 2 Black people, can he ask a question? What you say? Hold on, we get right back to you.
What my dad might say is, you just did. You just had your question.
Hey, Meleika, can the white man ask a question?
Yes, you may.
All right, go ahead, white man.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I know my place. Here's the thing. We talk about training, but really, and I forget what the exact quote is, but there's a famous quote, right? If for evil to prevail, all we have to do is for good people to do nothing. Okay? So...
Oh, I like that, Mark. Say that one more time.
For evil to prevail, all that has to happen is that good people do nothing. Okay? So here's why I ask that. I think what got me thinking about that was your comment, Representative Ford, that even racists can be held in check. And I was thinking to myself, well, that's true if there's somebody around to witness that they're being racist, like a good partner who's going to be willing to call the other cop on the mat and say, look, what you did there was wrong. And I mean, if somebody's got their knee on somebody's neck, then you got to do it in the moment, even if that person has more seniority than you. How often does that happen? In any business, most of us are afraid to challenge the power. Like, I'm afraid to challenge Representative Ford because he's my power.
Yeah.
And so here's where I'm going with this. When you have a system where it's the word of a victim to filing a complaint against a perpetrator, a cop, and it's my word against your word, which word is going to prevail? Look, we have instances where there's been video of cops doing racist things and they still try to deny it. I mean, look at Jason Van Dyke. He almost got off. And so to me, here's the real issue is we can hold the racists accountable. We can weed them out. Part of it is going to be the pre-hire testing and background checks and all that. And I agree, look, there's no reason why these background checks can't be as intense for this job as they are to go work in the White House. Because the reality is you're more likely to have say over somebody's life in this job rather than that job. So to me, this is the bottom line on all of this. How can we get accountability to stick in a system where it's the Black young man saying the cop discriminated against me?
That's right.
And racism is so sick because we can see it happening on video. A Good Samaritan will record the situation and they will tell us what you're looking at is not what you're seeing.
Right.
Like,
right.
How sick is that?
Well, you know what? Meleika, it's unbelievable. There's something that we have to, when you have an example of what you actually are talking about that exists, we got to praise that individual. So there's a clip that we need to go to because you guys brought it up, and there was two white cops, and it was a disgusting Sunrise Police chief respond to a body cam showing Sergeant grabbing a fellow officer by the throat. This officer actually stopped a fellow officer from abusing someone else, and they got into it. We should go to that clip.
Sunrise Police released this body camera video to 7 Investigates after a tip led us to ask about a November 19th incident. Citing an ongoing internal affairs investigation, the department turned off the sound and obscured almost all the faces, except for one, Sergeant Christopher Police.
When he went up and put his hand on her throat, what was your reaction?
I find this behavior to be disgusting. I think the video speaks for itself.
Just a minute earlier, the body cam shows a man being walked by officers to a patrol car. He was being arrested for aggravated battery after police say he hit people outside this convenience store. The man under arrest is already in handcuffs, but officers appear to be having difficulty getting him into the car. Around that time, Sergeant Police pulls up and walks up to the suspect. Sunrise Police Chief Anthony Rosa says he could not tell us what the sergeant said, but says it made the situation worse.
I find it to be inappropriate and unprofessional, because what he did is he escalated the situation when calm was actually required.
You see the cuffed man back away in the back seat as Sergeant Police leans into the car.
And we saw that he had pepper spray in his hand. Was he threatening to use that on the cuffed suspect?
So the pepper spray was out and aimed at the suspect.
Suddenly, an officer races towards the sergeant and pulls him by the belt with both hands away from the car. Sergeant Police, pepper spray still in one hand, grabs the officer with the other and pushes her against a patrol car.
The initial contact between the sergeant and the officer was his hand against her throat.
Watch again from both camera angles. It's quick, but the sergeant's hand is at her neck before moving to her shoulder. Seconds later, he walks back to the car with the cuffed suspect, opens the door and closes it before pointing at the officer and saying something. Chief Rosa says the young officer did the right thing.
So I'm very proud of this police officer. She took some definitive action. I can only imagine what she must be feeling. She's a newer officer and he's a very senior sergeant.
Just how new? The 28-year-old officer, who we are not naming, has been with Sunrise Police for just over 2.5 years. Compare that to 46-year-old Sergeant Christopher Police, a 21-year-plus veteran of the force. If one of us had ever grabbed an officer by the throat, we would be arrested, we would be put in jail. Why is that not happening with him?
So there's some details of the investigation that I've not disclosed that I'm unable to disclose right now. And if any of the information that comes up during the investigation rises to a level of criminal behavior or criminal conduct, then we'll address it appropriately.
There is a new state law requiring departments train officers on their duty to intervene if they see another officer using excessive force. Chief Rosa says Sunrise already has policies requiring intervening and de-escalation.
This officer intervening and stopping a situation from getting any worse is a direct reflection of the training that we do with the police department. And I think that it's important to note that the behavior is very unacceptable by the sergeant, but the behavior of the officer that intervened is exactly what society's asking their police officers to do right now.
There it is. Don't you have to give praise to that white police officer, the lady that went up against her, I would believe her
superior.
Superior. She protected him from doing something that he shouldn't have done. That's what we were looking for in the George Floyd case.
How often are we going to see that?
Yeah,
we don't. So, oh my God, that was so spectacular.
And by the way, how are we going to reward this good officer? You know, I hope she was promoted or given a raise or something.
Yeah.
I hope she wasn't hurt later.
Amen. I hope she didn't destroy her career by doing the right thing.
By doing the right thing. So that's an example of there are good cops. The suspect was a Black man, somewhat just like George Floyd's situation. He was handcuffed. He was fighting.
That just always amazes me.
And all it took, oh my God, we definitely know that there are good cops out there, and that's what we have to highlight.
But the good, you know what? Let's say if the situation was the same, but there was no video.
Oh.
Let's say the situation was the same, but there was no good cop. And this a-hole would have done what he did. And then the man who was handcuffed, after appropriate, law enforcement stuff happened, the lawyer gets him out of jail. The man goes to the police station and says, I want to file a complaint against the senior. I mean, if the man can choke out his fellow woman cop, and by the way, what does it take to actually fire a cop?
Right. He should be fired.
Cop didn't get fired. There's going to be investigation during which he gets paid. And then you know what? When he doesn't get paid, the police union's going to stand up for him and say, well, we got to protect this guy, even though he choked out a fellow police union member. That's what the frustration is to me, is that if that Black man who was the perpetrator handcuffed, paid his dues and the process went through, and then he filed a complaint, it would have never gone anywhere.
And Meleika,
how do you change that?
Right. And Meleika, let me ask you guys something. And this may sound ignorant to some, but who in the hell said that an arrest had to be easy?
Right, exactly. Like here, well, put the handcuffs on me.
Here, go on.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Who said it was supposed to be easy? And that's why training is important, so that you not only know how to arrest, but de-escalate, so that the arrest could become easier. You know what I mean?
The guy,
and it looked like they had de-escalated. They just was refusing to get into the car. It wasn't like he was swinging and trying to get away or anything. I don't understand. But then people will be like, well, you have to have sympathy for that sergeant. You don't know what he's been going through over the years as a police officer.
Doesn't matter.
It's like, no, he took a situation that should have been simple with training.
Right.
With training and got him in the car.
And you know what, Mark?
Substitute criminal.
What you say, Mark? What you say?
I said substitute the word criminal. Say that again, Meleika, but where you said sergeant, say criminal.
Criminal, yes. He was a criminal. And him choking out his fellow officer, I mean, thank God a camera was rolling, because had she reported that, I bet you the other officers wouldn't have backed her up.
You know what? I could probably feed Englewood if I got a nickel for every time a Black person said, thank God there was a camera.
Oh my God. And it's clear that this didn't just happen at one time. It's clear that there's this code of conduct, and there's a lot of cops that really, really want to serve and protect with dignity and protect the profession. But guess what? There are consequences for them, because there are no consequences against bad behavior that's going to be followed through. I know we got a lot of clips. What's the next one that you want to talk about?
You know, I do want to say I did have a personal experience where a police officer did the right thing because another police officer was trying to put me with the criminals. I called them. I actually called them, and she chose to put me against the wall with the people that I called the police on. And she's running my name and all of that. And the police officer she was with was like, "What are you doing?" He checked her. So, I mean, it does happen. We just, you know, it does happen. But I think a lot of police officers are probably fearful. That's why I say, thank God the camera was rolling for her, because I bet you no one would have believed her. No one would have backed her up, especially being a woman.
Can I ask you, Representative, body cameras in Chicago for cops are relatively recent, right? Only in the last few years?
Yeah, they've become required.
When you guys were passing that legislation, who lobbied against it?
Well, you know, people that it would benefit the most, you know, I don't understand why law enforcement at the time would lobby against it. But now law enforcement understands how valuable it is. And that's why it's important to respect one's views and try to get people to come around to what's right. Okay, they were against it. Now they could see why the body cams are so valuable, so important. I mean, you look at cases where the young Hispanic kid was killed in the alley. Body cam video, whether we believe that shooting was justified or not, it worked in the favor of a Chicago police officer, and he didn't get charged with murder for killing the teenage boy in the alley. This case right here, the officer, the white lady, had body cam, and it showed misconduct from a criminal police officer that had over 26 years of experience doing it his way. It's easy to fire him today, and immediately it changes the behavior and the culture of the police force. That's all you have to do. I don't think any police officer that's there to do the right thing want to see constant misconduct, because it stains all of them. And it takes leadership in the city to make sure that you change that culture.
See, I'm going to challenge you on that because one of the things that struck me in that clip was that the investigation was happening now due to a tip. Okay.
Oh.
Right. When did the actual incident happen? Do you happen to hear that?
You're right. That was something there
back in November.
You know, but you know what? Maybe the lady officer didn't turn the video in or something.
I don't know, maybe what, and I don't know what's supposed to be, but there was at least a half dozen cops there.
Wow.
And all of them watched an officer violently attack and threaten with bodily harm a junior officer. Okay. If you do that in the Army, you get court-martialed. And so we have a situation where, let's say it was even this last November. Okay. They're just, this was just recently in the news. It just started being investigated. How much time who wants to bet me that between November and now that the perpetrator cop tried to get that video to be lost?
Wow.
Right. I bet you anything, because she's got a case if she wanted to sue. If she sued, would she'd probably lose her job. They would find reason to fire her or something. But yeah, that was horrifying that none of those officers came to her rescue, because that was a big dude.
Yeah, he was pretty strong. So, you know, police, we know that they're under a lot of pressure. There's suicide that we have to worry about. We know that there's carjacking going on. We know that there's just people stealing the ambulance. How you say it? There's just so much.
We have a clip with that.
Yeah, we do have that clip.
We got the clip on that. Let's go to it then.
So we're just literally south of the last Dwight exit, and this vehicle is starting to drift down to where it's almost completely stopped on the roadway. So this may be over here. Looks like he's going to be bailing out. We've got the doors open. The individual is out of the ambulance here now. The driver is out. Looks like troopers are now have that individual.
He's not complying.
He is going to be apprehended here shortly. He has raised his hands in the air. He is following the commands of the state police. He is in the process of surrendering the troopers right now. That ambulance mechanically came completely apart. The rear end there basically failing after the left rear wheels, the tires came off, following the orders of the troopers here and now he's going to be taking off on foot, running across the interstate, going to be running across the northbound lanes of Interstate 55, individual carrying some sort of a backpack, now running southbound in the northbound lanes of I-55.
Is he trying to get
stop a vehicle, going to be trying to, he's not going to get into that one. That guy's not going to fall for that. Here comes the K-9 unit, officers, they make the tackle, they made the apprehension, and that individual is now...
And he's still alive.
That's an unusual circumstance.
No, now, I must say that's good police work.
Yes.
And that's what it's supposed to be. And
yes.
I would think that we have examples of good police work, and that's what we had there. So we
that was
give
training.
All credit to the police for having an example of how to deal with a situation.
Now, tell me, do you think that's a minority of circumstances or majority of circumstances, or about even, or what?
I think that's the new way. That's the new way.
God, you're good. I like that. The new way.
And we're. I mean, no matter who or what color the person is an example, and I think that's what we're moving toward.
That's I don't know, Meleika. What do you think?
It's a scary world out there. That's all I'm going to say. It's a scary world out there, and we got some evil people, and we got to get them out of the police department. You just got some evil, sick people with police badges, and you have angels with police badges. So I don't know. It goes back to the leadership.
The evil people. All that we need to do is for angels to look the other way, and the evil people win.
Well, Dr. King said, darkness cannot drive out
darkness. Only darkness. Light can do that.
Only light, not white.
I said light.
All right. And hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. So
one of my favorite quotes in the world.
Yep. Whatever. If there's anything you need, just go to King, and he's got it for you.
How do we get more police officers to report what's actually happening? Because again, we watched that woman getting choked out by the sergeant and no one did a thing. We watched George Floyd get murdered on camera and the other police officers did not do a thing.
And
how do we get them to do something?
But Meleika, here's the one interesting thing that I just want to remind everybody about, because Representative Ford keeps talking about training. And I don't mean to challenge the training is bad, but George Floyd was killed by the officer who was in charge of training the new deputies there. That's why none of them standing around and watching felt like they could challenge him, because he was their field training officer, or at least his partner's field training officer. Okay, so if this guy is giving training, how good can it be?
Well, that's why you have to make sure that you change the training. I mean, that you can't have the trainer trained by a system that's racist. I mean, just tell it like it is. I mean, and that's what you have. You have the actual people that can't think critically, that don't understand cultural diversity, training people. And that's where we run into problems. So,
do you think racism can be cured?
Racism could be controlled. You have a right to be racist, Meleika. I'm not trying to stop you from being racist. Okay. I can't do anything about it. One day your heart may come to a different harmony. But what I can do is make sure that there are consequences for anything that your actions cause harm to anyone else. So, you know, you can sit here all day long and look at me and say, I can't stand that person for whatever reason. As long as you just keep it to yourself and don't act on it, you have a right, free will. The moment you impose your hate on me is when we got to have some consequences in place for you. And that's exactly what happens. It's no different than Will Smith slapping our friend Chris Rock. Will Smith's free will said, I could slap him, but there has to be consequence. So that's, Will Smith had a right to do whatever he wanted to do. It's his life. But also Will Smith understands, because he's smart, that his behavior has consequences. Mm-hmm. And he's
what are the structural things that can actually be done? Because again, the point is that there is currently, other than being what Meleika will call an angel, other than being an angel and feeling like you're doing the right thing, which, you know, a lot of people get afraid to do if there's a lot of like, you know, if my mom was alive right now, bless her memory, she would, and she was watching this, she'd probably call me and say, hey, be careful being sympathetic with those black people and talking so much about the cops, they'll start pulling you over too, because that was her mentality. And you know what, I can't, like, as insane as it sounds, I can't say that I probably, you know, wouldn't be getting a few more tickets if I did this a lot. So the point is, how do you incentivize the good and promote the good? And by the way, I don't agree with you that police, I don't think everybody has the right to be racist. I actually think if you are a doctor or a policeman or a fireman, you can't be racist.
Well, how are you going to find out? How are you going to find out?
Well, again, how are you going to find out if they're, you know, rapists? You're not. But the point is that as you watch them, as you get to know them, as you hear what words they use,
right, then you get them.
Right. So if I'm a junior cop and my senior partner in the car keeps using the N-word, what should I do?
You got a right to use, let me tell you, one thing's for sure. You got a right to use it, but then there must be consequences. Once we know that, I mean, you're not going to be able to tell whether or not a doctor is racist until you start seeing his behavior, his or her behavior.
Well, let me give you another example. And this just happened. What if the doctor or the cop is posting racist things on their social media? There you go.
Now you got to get rid of them. But my point is, how do you know until they show it? So once they show it,
I think a lot of racism. I don't think most racists are afraid. I don't think they're.
That's why and they're going to act
their brains.
You're right, and they're going to act out. The problem is our system really haven't really provided consequences, dealt blows to racist acts and behavior. That's the problem. And the moment they act out, that's when there should be a situation where they're dealt with. For you guys remember the Dunkin' Donuts case where the guy, I think, Mark, you brought this up. The guy called the clerk in the Dunkin' Donuts the N-word. And, you know, did the guy that came to the Dunkin' Donuts have a right to say what he wanted? Yep. But guess what? There are consequences for what you say and what you do. And what happened to him? He got killed by the Dunkin' Donuts worker. I hear you, Mark. People, we can't, how are we going to say that you don't have a right to do what you want with your own life?
I would hope that the police officer riding in the car with their superior and they hear the superior dropping the N-word, I would hope that they would report that. And I would want to know if somebody's about to perform surgery on me, if they have been using the N-word. I want to know I want to know that.
Now, you know,
before
I'm
you
agreeing
cut
with
me
you.
open.
Because look,
I'm agreeing with you.
Your right to swing your arm, your right to swing your arm ends at my nose. Okay? And so the rhetorical is, if a cop is using the N-word with a partner, I believe that's plenty enough to get that cop off the street. But will that ever happen? I don't know.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I didn't say that a racist cop has a right to serve on the force. A racist doctor has a right to be a doctor and operate on people or see patients. A racist teacher has a right to be a teacher and qualified and endorsed and have a license in the state. I didn't say that. I said that a person has free will to be whoever they want, but don't impose hate on another and cause harm. When you do that, there must be consequences for you. And when you prove who you are, Maya Angelou say, believe them. If you prove
they
that
tell
you're
you believe
racist,
them,
you better believe them. And what's in place right now to prevent it from coming out? And what's in place right now to deal with it if and when it come out?
They're protected. That's the scary part.
Right.
I think a lot of cops are racist on their social media. I don't even think it's a secret.
Right.
Okay. So I just don't understand how that happens. I don't understand, you know, and we ought to look, because as many people as might get hurt or killed at the hands of the cops, there are a lot more Black people that die from heart attacks and strokes and high blood pressure.
Childbirth.
Yes. And I've been helping a friend of ours, State Representative Mary Flowers, because she's working on the issue because maternal mortality in Black communities is huge. So I would hope maybe sometime in the future, we should talk about racism in other critical fields, because I think some people in the Black community die because they don't want to go to a doctor, because they don't feel comfortable with that doctor. And I think that's probably in total a bigger killer than all the law enforcement incidents. I hope we get a chance to talk about that sometime. Representative Ford, what's your final thoughts on today's conversation? I'm all heated. I might need to change my shirt after we're done.
Oh my God, I see you sweating.
I'm swinging my arms and yelling at my computer.
I mean, my goodness, all I'm thinking is that we have a situation in society that we know exists, and that's racism, that's hate, not just amongst police, but you have racist teachers, racist doctors, racist store clerks, racist bums, you name it, they're out there. And so we have to recognize that in society that we need to learn to care about people that's different than us and give them an opportunity to exist. We actually want to get rid of people because they look different than us and we don't understand them. Mm-hmm. Let's listen to one another. Let's care for one another and see each other as human beings. I mean, I see people treat dogs better than they treat Black people.
Yeah. Well, and see, I'm.
You're speechless.
Well, rarely, but this has been really interesting for me because I see it as sort of, and as you know, I'm, pretty Black for a white guy, so I see it a little bit. I can't say I know what it's like, and I would never say that, but I can at least see that perspective. But then also I see the other perspective when I'm on white people and how hard I've lost friends by calling them out for saying something racist. How many cops are willing to do that at the stake of their career? And so to me, I don't want to depend on somebody doing the right thing. I don't want to depend on somebody feeling like right. You know what I want to see? I want to see a cash incentive of $1 million to any cop that turns in a fellow cop for racism and that complaint is sustained. Okay, that's what I want to see.
That's incentive.
Meleika, I think that's incentive. And I think there's no doubt that people want to sleep well at night. They want to have a good conscience. And for those that don't want to have a good conscience, that want to bring harm, those are the people that we have to purge out of the system. But there are people in these systems that need support to help purge out the others. They need to know that there's somewhere that they could go to and realize that there's some support for them when they want to report misconduct. And we give a lot of bad rap just to police, but believe me, I've been through the system of education, and there was racism in the seminary when I went to the seminary.
Oh God, yeah.
And so we talk about the police, but there's racism everywhere. But we deal with the police because they're right in our communities, and we need to make sure that we heal this relationship because it's in plain view every day.
How do you deal with it in legislation? Because there's some racist representatives out
there.
There
you go, Meleika. Yes, thank you for calling me out, calling my group out. You're absolutely right. It's there too.
Well,
it's
the
there
only
too.
difference that I can see, Meleika, is that Representative Ford is hired by the people of his district. Okay. And so if people in his district are informed about, certain things and they still choose to vote for that, I think that's very different than the taxpayers paying racist teachers. Okay. And I could argue that a racist teacher or a racist professor or seminary docent or whatever could arguably ruin more Black people than a cop can.
Yep. Yeah. And that's, racist teachers teach racist cops because, it's just amazing. And the racist school system that Meleika, you and I work on legislation to teach accurate history, because accurate history is actually a healing mechanism for society to end racism and bigotry. Accurate history, knowing my brothers and sisters and their struggles. I don't have to call it critical race theory. Let's just call it accurate history that teaches respect and culture of one another's culture.
Freaking common sense. Don't be stupid.
Oh, I was waiting on you to say
and I'm
that,
saying
Mark.
that to white people, okay?
Yes.
I'm saying that to white people.
Meleika, why don't you give us something to go with?
Man, I feel like I need to go for a therapy session after this because my heart is just, when I watch those clips and I'm watching the news every day, I can't tell you, it weighs so much on my soul and on my spirit when I just see people being hurt by just pure evil. It just hurts. It hurts me so much. And
get strong, Meleika.
I know I internalize it. I internalize it and I need to not and just, keep trying to do good out there. But it does take a toll. And I know for others out there, I know they feel the same way. It's rough. It's a world where it's evil versus good, and humans are complex because sometimes you have evil who do good and you have good who do evil. Sometimes it gets very complicated. But when it comes to racism, I think that is the worst evil that there is. And if you witness it and someone that you're working with is acting out with hate onto people who do not deserve it, you need to say something. That's the only way it's going to stop. You need to say something
right away, right, Meleika? Can you just talk to them and say,
no, you can't talk to a racist.
You can't talk to them?
No.
Just go straight and report them.
Well, because you need to first of all, they're going to think you're attacking them.
All right.
And second of all,
and they're never going to admit it.
They're never going to admit it.
That's a good point.
But also, they're going to attempt to hide their behavior because now they know somebody might report them.
Yep. But you guys seem to have this all figured out. This has been another episode of Chicago Hill. I'm LaShawn Ford, straight from the west side of Chicago. Got Meleika from the good old North Shore with the waves beating up against the shores of Lakeshore Drive, I should say the Sabo Lakeshore Drive, and Mark right there in Oak Park with those high property taxes and great school districts. See you guys next week.
And a good percentage of Black people too, mind you, and still high property values. It can be done. It can be done.
Only light could drive out darkness.
That's right.
That's right.
Mark,
that is
are you
right.
part of the light?
Yeah, but in your case, I don't want to drive out the darkness.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Now, Mark, you be thinking on your feet. So now what was Dr. King thinking when he thought about driving out the darkness? Dr. King, when I get to heaven, I'm gonna ask him, why do you want to drive out the darkness with the light? Let's just stick with, hate.
Some punk named Mark took that and twisted it.
Oh, Lord. All right. We'll see you guys next time on Chicago Hill.
All right. Fight for your life.
Fight. And Mark, you got to tell them.
Don't be stupid, white people.